begin with the end in mind. Even if you don't want to sell your company, even if you never thought, oh, someone might want to buy it one day, begin with the end in mind, because that's going to put you in a really strong position. If you're positioning yourself to sell one day, it's going to drive you towards looking at growth and profitability and stability, and then it can be there for you if and when you need to. Everyone needs an exit strategy, whether you're going to retire or whether just life changes. It's also okay to change your mind, that maybe you just don't want to do that anymore. You want to do something else.
Support for this show comes from Exit Factor. Exit Factor offers a proven method that helps small to mid-sized business owners maximize their company's value. Through one-to-one consulting services and online programs, the trusted advisors at Exit Factor teach entrepreneurs how to successfully navigate and fully leverage strategies when buying, building, and selling their companies. Participants that follow the program have experienced considerable results, with some increasing business value as much as 57% in 1 year. It's time to start running your business every day like you are going to sell it. Learn more at exitfactor.com/pod. Now enjoy How I Sold.
Welcome to How I Sold, presented by Exit Factor. Only 13% of all businesses in the U.S. are sold, but we only hear about the billion-dollar stories. Here we explore the real-life stories of entrepreneurs and business owners like you that were able to build, grow, and sell their small businesses. Now, here is your business exit expert, #1 best-selling author, and host, Jessica Fialkovich.
Welcome to How I Sold. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and I created this podcast after spending over a decade in mergers, acquisitions, and exits, and noticing we often hear the stories of the unicorn sales. Those companies valued over $1 billion. But we often don't hear the real life stories, the stories of the thousands of entrepreneurs every year that build, grow, and sell their successful small businesses. These are their stories. Today on the show, building a culture that fuels a business. Erin Carpenter was inspired at a young age to help others battling with mental illness. But it was not until grad school that she realized that part of that journey also involved building a successful practice that supported those who support the rest of us. Today, we learn how she started building the foundation of her practice fairly young, learning from others and her own experience along the way. Those skills ultimately allowed her to face some of the toughest challenges as an entrepreneur: switching business models, tackling a pandemic as a mental health provider, and battling cancer. This is Erin's story on how she sold Thrive Counseling. Welcome back, everyone, to our next episode of How I Sold. And I'm very excited to have with me a colleague and one of our past sellers with us, Erin Carpenter. Welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah. So Erin, I'm not going to go into your bio because we're going to tell your whole story for the listeners. So let's start way back when. Where were you born and raised? And did you always think you're going to be an entrepreneur? Like, were you selling lemonade on the sidewalks or anything like that? And what was kind of your environment you grew up in?
Yeah, I didn't at all think about being an entrepreneur. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania, in State College, that's where Penn State is. So it's kind of a small town. It's a college town. Both of my parents worked for the university. They're academics. And I didn't think at all about being an entrepreneur until I went to school. I went to undergrad and I studied psychology and quickly learned that you couldn't do much with an undergraduate degree in psychology. So thought about going to graduate school to become a therapist. That was something I really wanted to do. I wanted to help people. I was really interested in mental health and therapy and psychotherapy. And then I quickly learned I didn't like working for other people and I wanted to work for myself, which is something that you can do as a therapist. You can start your own private practice. And so that came into my mind as I was in graduate school and I started thinking about it. I remember I even went to like a little seminar learning thing about how to start a private practice on the side in graduate school, because they don't teach you that in grad school. They don't teach you about how to set up an LLC. They don't teach you about marketing. They don't teach you about any of these things. And so I knew I needed a different skill set to do that.
Yeah. That's very interesting because it is true. A lot of people that go into healthcare and healthcare related fields do so because you're passionate about the field, right? But I've heard that a lot is that in graduate school or various certification courses, whichever path they're doing for their healthcare field, there is not any education at all around running your own practice, which a lot of practitioners end up doing, right?
Yeah, a lot end up doing, and a lot want to do that. I run into a lot of my colleagues, especially earlier in my career, that wanted to make this jump into private practice, but didn't know how to do it at all. I wish that they offered some classes in this. But I've had to learn, like most entrepreneurs, just trying and failing all over again. And especially when I started the practice, which was in about 2012, there weren't a lot of resources. I mean, today there's books and courses and podcasts and so many things specifically for folks in the mental health field, but lots of other fields, how to start a private practice, how to bill, the fee-for-service model, but it wasn't around back then.
So, where was this course that you found for yourself? Was it connected to your graduate school? And what was kind of your inspiration for taking that course? Did you just saw that lack of, I guess, skills or development from your graduate program?
Yeah, I think I saw a flyer about it actually. So it wasn't connected with my university. I was going to grad school in Philadelphia at the time, and I remember I was the only student that was in this little seminar. It was like a day long seminar, and everyone else had already graduated and gotten their clinical license, which takes about 2 to 3 years for social workers like me. So I was already really thinking about it, and just I'm someone that's really independent, and I like to do things my own way, which is very common for entrepreneurs. So I was seeking out those resources really early, although it took me about 4 to 5 years out of grad school until I was able to start that private practice and move into working for myself full time.
So, what was your first step in your career path before starting your own private practice? What did you do during those 4 to 5 years?
What didn't I do is more the question. When I graduated, I moved from Philly out to Colorado. I knew I just wanted to go out west. I packed up all my stuff in my car and just hiked it out here, not knowing anyone. But found a job pretty quickly, and luckily found amazing friends. Living in Denver at that time was really, really fun. And in the clinical work field, you need to work. It's basically like a residency where you're working 2 to 3 years underneath someone else's supervision before you can take your board exams to get that independent license, which you normally need to do to go out on your own into private practice. So I worked in an eating disorder treatment center. I worked for the Rape Crisis Center in Denver for a long time. I worked at an adolescent treatment center. I was just getting lots and lots of experience, getting those hours, and starting to think about starting my own practice, what that would look like. I did something pretty common, which is I started this private practice and worked nights and weekends there while I kept my full-time job. So I worked a lot, and I did that for about a year. Yeah, about a year, until I kind of got up the courage and the savings and a little bit of the know-how to say, like, okay, I've got some good lead flow coming in. I feel like I've got a handle on these finances, and I've got a good like marketing plan in place. It's working pretty well. So I think that I can like make this jump, which was kind of scary at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, always scary for any entrepreneur. Did all the work you did, obviously it built up your skill set as a therapist and you were learning all kinds of skills and techniques for your talent. But was there anything that you took away from those different experiences that helped prepare you for running your own practice or even give you the confidence more to make that jump?
I didn't learn those direct skills, but I really did try to think about the lead flow and the marketing, because that's a really, really big thing. It's easy to learn how to set up an LLC. It's easy to get an office space. But if you don't have clients coming in to see you and you can't articulate what you're going to do for them pretty well, then you're not going to get a lot of clients that way. And so I was really paying attention to that. And although I was working in nonprofits and for-profits and large and small, I was paying attention to like how people found them, what kind of services they were looking for, and what made a successful kind of enterprise in that way.
Yeah, I think that's super insightful because, I do see a lot of people that undervalue sales, right? So I think all successful entrepreneurs have to have a really great sales pipeline and sales skills. And sales is kind of a dirty word sometimes, especially I'm sure in the healthcare field and therapy practices. Like, you don't want to be salesy, but you do have to have a pipeline of clients to build a successful business, no matter what industry you're in. So I think that was super insightful for you at the time. And I'm sure it really was something that you were able to leverage while you were growing your practice. So let's jump. So you were working nights and weekends, and then you got the confidence to leave your full time gigs and become a practice owner full time. What was that? I'd say, what was the precipitous of that? Was it because the lead flow had built up enough that you were making enough money in the private practice side that you didn't have to have the full time? Or was there a point where you had to jump without a safety net and just give it all you had?
That's a really good question. I'm a person that's really financially conservative, and so for me, I had to write down what would I need in order to feel comfortable to make this jump. And so for myself, that would be the practice was supporting itself, meaning that it was at least a break even, if not profitable. And I needed to have some personal savings just to like pay my bills and stuff like that. And so once I reached those goals, then I felt comfortable to do it. And I could always go back and get a job, but I wanted to give myself a good 6 months to a year to get this up and running and like see what I could do. And I just loved it from day one. I love just doing my own thing, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And you really learn from those mistakes early. And started to scale. And then as a single therapist in an office, if you have good lead flow, you're going to get full pretty quickly. And so within about a year, I started to think about hiring someone to work for me because I had too many clients that I could serve. And instead of just referring them out to colleagues, which is a lovely thing to do, I thought, well, maybe I could hire someone with a really strong skill set that I would feel good about, that would represent my practice and my brand well. And started hiring some contractors, which I did for a few years, and then morphed to hire full-time W-2 employees to work for me, and started to grow the practice from there into a group, which I loved. I loved having this cool little team of like my people that I had hired. My focus at that point became really serving my employees well, and serving the business. What does the business need? And so I specifically thought about what is it that someone would want? A therapist, they maybe want to do private practice, but they don't want to run the whole thing themselves. And so I made sure they had lots and lots of autonomy. I was not a micromanager at all. Gave them really, really flexible work schedules, but made very clear expectations. I made it very clear to them, like, I don't want you to be in the office looking busy ever. Don't do that. Come in, see your people, take care of your clients, and then go do whatever it is you want to do that like fills you up. Whether that's running some errands during the day, like go down the street, and go to the gym, do whatever you need to do. We met once a week for an hour where like I bought everybody lunch and we like chatted about stuff, but I just tried to keep it really simple, and people really liked that. And even in the entire time I ran the practice, which was not very long, right? It ended up being about 7 to 8 years, but I didn't have any turnover, which is pretty unusual. And I don't take complete credit for that. I'm sure that was a lot about what was going on in my employees' lives, but I just got consistent feedback that we really like working here because you have a really manageable caseload, pretty good salary, and tons of flexibility and autonomy.
I mean, I think there's so many important pieces to pack out of there. First, I want to get kind of an update on the timing though. So you started your practice in 2012, right? When was the time you hired your first therapist to work for you? How long did that take where the practice outgrew you?
Yeah, it outgrew me in about a year and a half. And I started hiring some
Okay.
contractors and part-time folks, and then hired my first employee in 2014. And then when I sold it in 2020, or I'm sorry, 2021, so all of the years since COVID just kind of blur together for me. I don't know about you.
I know, right?
It's
They all
just
blend
one big
together.
time black hole in 2021. So I had 5 full-time employees at that time.
Yeah. And I think it's a testament to you, Erin, that you were able to see your role pivot as a business owner from being a technician, being like a really good therapist, right? To now that I have a team, my role is now in support of them, right? And it's about building the business, it's about building a business that can support them in their lifestyles. You mentioned that there were some leaders along the way you saw do that you really admired. Is there anybody you remember off the top of your head, or where were you exposed to that? Because I see that's a concept that a lot of business owners do struggle with when they make that jump from, hey, I'm the main doer in the business, to now I'm the main leader. And that difference between leadership and management sometimes gets missed, right? So where were you exposed to that concept?
Well, I was thinking about like my first job when I was in high school was working at a Hallmark store. Do you remember Hallmark stores, like the card stores,
Yes.
everything? Anyway, I loved this job. A really awesome boss there who, she just, she was not above doing anything that needed to be done and was checking in with people to make sure they had the tools they needed to do their job well. And so that was one example that pops out in my mind. And also my mentor in graduate school, I was lucky enough to have for the whole of graduate school, and he was my supervisor, and he really took that role in checking in with me. There were things I had to do, but his role was to guide me and teach me, make sure I had what I needed to do the job well. And it's this idea of kind of like a servant leadership, although I know it has some religious connotations. I don't mean it in that way, but just this way that like, no, like my job is to make you successful. My job isn't to tell you what to do.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you pulled it from experiences you had, mentors that you had. I say a lot of times, like, our life is just way too short to learn all the mistakes on our own, right? So being able to leverage other people's experience and apply that to your current experience when you're building the practice really made you successful and differentiated you in an industry that is very, I would say, not known for team and culture and things like that, right?
That's true. Yeah, I would say that, therapists, we either kind of work in larger agencies, like community mental health centers, or we're sort of lone wolves. We're out, we're doing our individual things. There's not a lot of people that do a group practice model in that way. Although I think it can work really beautifully. But I've also thought about like what would I want if I were going to join another practice? What are the things that I would want to do? Like I paid for my employees to do lots of learning and like continuing education. If there was some certification they wanted to get, I would say, okay, let's work together. Let's do it. They had a budget every year for those types of things, but if they wanted to go over, we would talk about that. And normally I would support that with them. And I would also always, 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 if a client were unhappy for whatever reason with our services, I would immediately intervene. I would say, tell them to call me, tell them to email me, or like I would contact them directly. I would take them out of that and just basic customer service, like apologize. I'm sorry you had this experience. I would refund their money like in a heartbeat because I would just much rather have people out there in the world having a good interaction with my business than, like lose a little bit of money. I'm like happy to do that. And we gained a really strong reputation in our community due to that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So we've talked a lot about what's going on with the business, right? But I'm interested in what's going on personally for you, because I say like, entrepreneurship, it's intertwined with our personal lives, right? Because it's something that we're building. It becomes a part of us, not our identity, but a part of us. And we have to balance that alongside of other things. So we know you've made the move from Pennsylvania to Colorado. You meet some great friends out there. But what else is going on in your life while you're building this practice?
Oh my gosh. Well, I met and fell in love with another entrepreneur, and we got married. And so now we're on this roller coaster together. Oh my gosh. And so it's just such a crazy existence, because like neither of us know quarter to quarter how much money we're going to make, what's going to happen. He has a very different business than me. It's a very very different world. It's like a tech startup world. But we got married. I had my first kid. I was able to pay my own maternity leave, which is like a really big goal. Like the practice was up and sustaining so that I could pay myself a reduced salary while I took some time off with that. And just life just started getting like pretty crazy. And I was working a lot, but I wasn't working. I didn't feel overworked. Along the way, I hired a part-time assistant, and that was amazing. When you can cash flow that assistant, man, you're really, really doing great.
Yeah, and take all that admin work off. It's interesting. So, I mean, you and I know each other through your husband, Rob, and through Entrepreneurs Organization. I've had a couple people on the show that are married and in business and entrepreneurs together, but no one yet that both of the parts of the couple are entrepreneurs, but in different businesses. So did you feel like, yeah. So I'm wondering, like, do you feel like that you guys fueled each other in terms of building the business? And what was the dinner conversations like? Would you help each other on the other sides of the businesses, or were you pretty autonomous in your own businesses?
Oh no, we're each other's biggest cheerleaders. And we even have a phrase for it, because we have to say to each other, can I have a board of directors meeting with you? And that means like, I got this thing going on with my business. I want to sit down and explain it to you, and I want your advice. And of course, it's good to have really good boundaries around that, right? Like his business is his business, my business is mine. But I found it invaluable to have that outside perspective. And sometimes his ideas or advice didn't translate to the mental health field, because there are some particular things about how you can advertise. You can't take, any sort of like referral fees or kickbacks. There's some ethical things you need to do that like don't exist in other fields. But I felt like it's been lovely. People on the outside have told me like, Erin, I don't know how you guys do what you do. It's pretty unique.
Yeah, but I love the biggest cheerleaders. And I think it's really, I think for people who don't experience that, right, who don't experience a lifestyle where both partners are building something, bigger than themselves and taking pretty big risks. And that, yes, you mentioned like you can always go back and get a job, right? There's always fallback, but at the end of the day, you are taking pretty big risks. And I think people who don't experience that can't truly understand the sacrifice that you guys are making personally and for your families in order to build these great businesses and build great things. So I give you guys kudos for that. And I love the board of directors meeting.
Yeah.
So hopping back into the business, you guys are growing. Is there any specific things, any hurdles that you had to overcome as you were growing, as you were building the team that, you feel like maybe at that time were insurmountable, but once you got through it, you thought it was better for the business and better for your team in general? When we come back in just a moment, how Erin decides to pivot her business model to operate a more profitable practice right before a global pandemic shakes the foundation of the company. Stay with us. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and you are listening to How I Sold.
Support for this show comes from Exit Factor. Have you ever wondered if your business is sellable? The truth is, thousands of businesses sell every year, from just a few $1,000s to billions. Now, there are a ton of experts that will teach you how to start a business, more on how to grow one, but only Exit Factor will teach you how to build a valuable and efficient business that is sellable at any time, no matter what happens. Visit exitfactor.com/pod to learn more about us and take our free assessment to find out if your business is sellable. That's exitfactor.com/pod.
Hey, welcome back to How I Sold. I'm Jessica Fialkovich. We're with Erin Carpenter, founder of Thrive Counseling. She's entered the mental health field to give back and support others, but she's found a passion not just for supporting her clients and patients, but her team as well. She's given them all the tools that they need to thrive in their careers while also balancing their life. But she and her team are about to face a trifecta of challenges: a business model shift, a global pandemic, and cancer. So hopping back into the business, you guys are growing. Is there any specific things, any hurdles that you had to overcome as you were growing, as you were building the team, that you feel like maybe at that time were insurmountable, but once you got through it, you thought it was better for the business and better for your team in general?
Well, one big pivot that I did decide to make 3 years into having all my employees was to end our long-standing Medicaid contract. And I got that of a long time ago. I loved serving that community. I felt that was important to the mission and the vision of my company. But the state changed a lot of things about the Medicaid program at that time, and it became kind of untenable for us to continue to do that. And I decided to make that big decision, told my employees. They were really nervous about it. It was a large part of our lead flow at the time, but I knew that I could make it up. I knew that I could do it. I knew I was like, give me 4 months. Don't worry about it. Like your caseload's going to take a hit for a little bit, but it's going to be okay. And of course, so that was one big thing, was to pivot to a private pay model. And of course, another really big thing was to navigate through COVID, right? When COVID hit and we had to shut down for a bit and we had to learn how to do telehealth overnight. And I told all my employees, we're going to get through this. This is going to be okay. I am going to make sure that you get paid. What I was doing, which is really common in my industry, is they're my W-2 employees, but it's a split of revenue between the practice and the employee. So, but they had enough leads to make their minimums and stuff like that. But all of a sudden, they couldn't see anyone. We didn't have any billables. And so I paid people out of my savings to keep a floor under them, and learned all this stuff really fast. I was really, really grateful for the PPP program, which I applied for to basically reimburse myself from all of my personal money that I was paying my employees. I was like, I'm going to keep you paid no matter what. We're going to get through this. But it was really stressful on the back end because all of a sudden there's no revenue coming in, but I'm still paying all my bills and trying to keep this afloat. And our clients understandably were like, well, I can't see you in person. This thing's probably going to blow over in a month. We'll just take a break. I'll come back when all this is over. And then it never got over, as you know. And so that was a challenge that I just navigated to the best of my ability. That was a hard time for every business owner, I think.
Yeah. And I think every business owner, but I think a lot of us thought about industries that we could see that were impacted, right? Restaurants, retail, things like that. But I think therapy and mental health specifically, you guys probably had a bit more of a roller coaster ride than people think about. Like, yes, pivoting to telehealth, major business model shift, right? And new technology, new processes, getting your therapist comfortable with that, getting the patients comfortable with that. But I also wonder, like, once everything settled, because we're seeing stories that come out now of like the mental health impact that the pandemic had on everyone. How quickly did you see that reflected in your practice? Or did that take some time for you guys to see that impact that was happening on everyone?
We saw that really early. I would say like a few months in, we started to see on both sides of it, right? Like, I was talking with my employees and they're like, my clients are not doing well. Like all my people are relapsing. Everyone's just everywhere. And then my employees themselves, doing telehealth it's a beautiful tool. I'm glad we have it. It's helpful for access, but everyone's experienced Zoom fatigue, right? But imagine that your Zoom fatigue is not just your coworkers or your clients, but it's people crying, in their closet as they're, doing telehealth with you while their kids are screaming outside. I mean, that's what I've done. I think going through COVID with young kids was just a completely different experience. But that's a tangent. So I was seeing therapist burnout. I was seeing, clients not doing well, and we're still seeing that. I mean, there is a massive tidal wave of like the mental health crisis that, in my opinion, is only beginning to crash onto the shoreline. I can see it out there. At sea, it is coming our way, and we're starting to see it in relapse rates. We're seeing it in suicide rates. We're seeing it in disability, due to mental health problems. Depression is the number one cause of disability in this country. So yeah, we started to see that, and I became a coach for my employees. And I also, dug into some personal savings as well to give them extra time off, to like give them paid time off, say, take a week off. It's okay. I would step in and do emergency sessions with their clients if that's what was needed. So yeah, that was a very challenging time in that way. Thank you for bringing that up, because all the people working behind the scenes, healthcare heroes and all of that. And they certainly are, but therapists have been on the front lines and will continue to be with this fallout.
Yeah, I think it's an important aspect to bring up because, your team of therapists and all the therapists across the country that support individuals, like you are on the front lines and thinking about the mental health impact of caring for mental health impacts from this pandemic. And like you said, this is not, it's not over and done with a vaccine like the rest of it is. Like, this is going to reverberate for years and years to come. And I can only imagine that, yes, I know all of your therapists have hearts bigger than any of us can imagine. But yeah, it's got to be fatiguing, especially doing it across a computer when you really just want to be able to be in person with somebody, reach out and give some support. But yeah, so thank you for guiding your team through that. Thank you for your team for getting through that. And I know that it's only going to be longer and longer to come. So you've obviously had some major milestones and major growth things that you've had to overcome. Pivoting from Medicaid to private pay is a very strategic but very difficult business decision. And I know it's better for the business. Those who know about private practices know that that's it's a better business model, but it is a hard jump to make, right? Of guaranteed client flow and putting more pressure on the business owners. And then immediately or soon after that, you're facing an unprecedented pandemic that affects everything. So now I guess we're not through the pandemic yet, especially from a mental health capacity, but in our timeline, like you've addressed the immediate hurdles and the immediate things that you've overcome. And we're approaching in our timeline now, 2021, when you decided to exit the business. So tell me a little bit about that process for you. Did you prepare the business for sale? How did you decide to exit? Like, why did that come up for you at that point in your career?
Yeah, well, so the impetus to exit was because in late 2019, I was diagnosed with cancer. And to make a very long story short with that, I was diagnosed with cancer. I entered cancer treatment. I'm still kind of in cancer treatment 3 years later, but I'm doing really well. And it just became clear that I did not have what the business really needed. And I didn't have the stamina and the capacity to support my employees the way that I really wanted to. And my husband was pretty clear that he did not have the capacity or the desire to step in and run this business, if I became too ill or something really bad happened to me. And so we decided as a family to sell the company. And also the company was doing really well by that time. It was a strong place to make a sale. And so I wanted to step back. I wanted to work less. I wanted to spend time with my family. And I wanted to focus on my health. And that was the most important thing to me. So I thought about it. And although that was a difficult decision, as soon as it was made, I felt really good about it. I felt that I was doing what I needed to do at that time. And I don't believe that stress causes cancer, of course. Like cancer is just a very rare cancer that popped up. But I do believe that our lifestyle and our stress levels and where we put our energy impacts our health. And it was very clear to me that I needed to slow down quite a bit. And so that is something that happened, and it happens all the time. I mean, I was 34 when I was diagnosed. And so I want listeners to hear that and not come from a place of fear, but come from a place of like, have a plan, have a really good plan in place in case something happens and you can't run your business anymore. And like, who's going to take over and what's going to happen to your employees? And so I thought about it, and that was definitely the right decision. And it was hard. It's like my first baby, my company and my business that I've worked so hard for. But, after meeting with a wonderful business broker, at Transworld, and understanding what I could get for the business, what it might look like to sell it, I felt a lot more confident in moving forward with that.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you're doing well. I know it's still a battle you're fighting, but I'm glad that you're doing well and feeling well. And I do think it's an important discussion. Like one of the reasons I said at the top of one of the reasons I started this podcast is to tell the small business sales stories and not just these $1 billion exits. And the truth is most small to mid-sized business owners sell for personal reasons, right? And I think it is important at times that we recognize if our life is out of balance or there's a health issue that we need to take care of, what is truly the most important thing in our lives, which is, our health, family, and things like that. And it's okay to step away, and it's okay to let go, and it's okay to sell your baby, right? If that's what you need to support yourself, your family, and ultimately the business as well. So, Erin, thank you for sharing that and sharing that lesson with our listeners.
I remember learning along the way, or I heard on a podcast, or I read somewhere, I can't remember, it said, your business exists to serve you. You do not exist to serve your business. And so I've always tried to strive for that. And my business has served me, it served me along the way, and it served me when I was ready to sell it. And so I would encourage other people to think about that. And we think about that in therapy a similar way, in the sense that, like, I was taught as a therapist, you should not be working harder than your client, really, ever. And, if you find yourself feeling drained, if you find yourself, you're like, I feel like I want this more than them, to step back and reevaluate your approach and your boundaries.
So you've decided to sell, you've met with a broker, you get it listed on the market. What did you learn during the sale process, and any big takeaways that you had from going through the first sale of your business?
Well, it was a smoother process than I had imagined, to be honest, because we got it listed and there were some outside interested buyers. I chose to approach one of my employees, actually, the one who had been with me from the beginning. And I thought, man, she would really do well with this. She was already the practice manager at that time. And I thought about, at the age she was, at the time she was in her, in her family, having a baby, like what an awesome opportunity to buy into this business that was doing really well and really profitable. And so I approached her about it, and she was very surprised at first. I thought it was a little risky, right? Telling your employees that you're going to sell the company, and they have their feelings about that, which is understandable. But she was like, yes, like I want to make this happen. Like I want to do this. And so I ended up selling to her, which was awesome. And I stayed on, for a couple months just to make sure she gets everything that she needs. But she's doing so great, and we're still in touch. We had lunch actually not too long ago, and every once in a while she'll call me and say like, what do you think about this? Or like, I'm between hiring these two people, what do you think? Which I think is really flattering and sweet of her. But she's absolutely has this. I'm like, you're doing great. It's already growing. She's hiring people. So it was a really smooth and very gratifying process for me to sell.
I loved how your sale came together. I thought she was absolutely an ideal buyer for the business. And I do think it doesn't always work that way, but I love how you sat and you thought about not just her running the business, but how it would fit into her lifestyle, right? And we just talked about how your business and your personal life are very intertwined. So thinking about like, would this fit into her lifestyle? Would it balance with what she's got going on with her family? Would it, impact the goals she wants to achieve in her career at this point? And I think that thought process you went through solidified that she was going to be the right successor for the business and for the owner of that business. So, and I like that you stayed on. You guys still keep in touch, and you're there to support her as a mentor. But I'm interested in, what was your journey after the sale? Did you just take time off to focus on health, or, what was the day after like, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I took some time off, and was just kind of in stay-at-home mom mode. I had my second daughter in 2019. So she was 9 months old when I was diagnosed. At the time I was diagnosed, I had a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old. It was a very intense time. And then like 4 months after that, COVID hit. So there was a lot. So I focused on my health. I focused on resting. I focused on being mom for a while. And it was just really scan to scan for a while, and it still is. But I'm feeling a lot better. I've got a good, foundation under me, because also within that 3-year time, I had to do 2 really large surgeries, so I was recovering from those surgeries as well. But I took some time off, but I wanted to keep my clinical license, for future. So I kept doing continuing education, credits and things like that. And as most entrepreneurs, we can't really stay idle for long. We always want to do the next thing. And I personally was helped a lot, like through my diagnosis, and through those really dark times, I was helped by actually psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and that became my interest. And so I got trained up in that. And actually this year I started a new small practice. It's just me, pretty part-time right now. I think I'm going to keep it that way for a while, but became certified in ketamine assisted psychotherapy. So I'm offering that now. My new practice is called Psychedelic Growth, and my office is in Boulder, Colorado, and also doing training to offer other modalities as they become available. It's a really exciting thing in the field, and really, really hopeful. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about this mental health crisis, and we need some new tools. Oh my goodness, do we need some new tools that are really effective? And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm spending a lot of time with my family. I'm working part-time-ish on kind of like a passion project, and that's just a lovely place to be.
And I love that you were inspired by your own journey and searching for other tools that you can support people with. I mean, you're in a great area too. Colorado has been so supportive of the research into those new tools and for use in mental health. So before we jump to our last question, I'd love for you to just share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn about your new practice more.
Sure. Yeah. My website is psychedelicgrowth.net. So it's oldschool.net, not .com. And my office is in Boulder, but I can work virtually with anyone in the state of Colorado. I'm actually working on getting licensed in the state of Texas too, although that's TBD. So soon to expand to some other states, but you can find me there. You can drop me a line. I'd be happy to hear from you, answer questions.
Good. And we'll share that info in our show notes too. Erin, I've loved the story that you've shared with our listeners today and all the wisdom that you've shared with people, either, running private practices in the healthcare space, or even if you're just running your own small business. I think a lot of the takeaways you shared with our listeners today can help not only propel their growth, but also think about how their entrepreneurial life fits into their personal life. So every episode, I just wrap everything up, and I'd love for you to share one quote or piece of advice that you would give entrepreneurs that you've received that's been super valuable.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to lift something straight from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is an oldie but a goodie, but it's begin with the end in mind. Even if you don't want to sell your company, even if you never thought, someone might want to buy it one day, begin with the end in mind, because that's going to put you in a really strong position. If you're positioning yourself to sell one day, it's going to drive you towards looking at growth and profitability and stability. And then it can be there for you if and when you need to. Everyone needs an exit strategy, whether you're going to retire or whether just life changes. It's also okay to change your mind, that maybe you just don't want to do that anymore. You want to do something else.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us on How I Sold. And we're really excited for your sale of your practice, excited that you're doing well and you're healthy, and also excited for what the future holds with your new psychedelic practice. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's Erin Carpenter, founder of Thrive Counseling. Erin turned a passion for helping others and was able to make the difficult leap from client focus to business and employee focus. She's a true example of putting others before herself when she can, but also knowing when and how to focus internally when her health and family called for it. I'm so happy that Erin shared her story, and I hope you had some good takeaways from the conversation. We look forward to the next steps of her journey. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you want to support us, spread the word by subscribing on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. You can also leave us a 5-star review or post about us on social media. We really do appreciate it. If you would like to learn more about How I Sold or apply to be on the show, go to howisold.co. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and you've been listening to How I Sold.
Thank you for listening to How I Sold, presented by Exit Factor. Please follow us on your favorite podcasting app so you don't miss an episode. Another way to support the show is by leaving a review. Find more information about How I Sold and Exit Factor, including how to be on the show, at www.exitfactor.com/howisold.